Hi, so this case is about a residual income valuation for Coca-Cola. With over 500 brands in the portfolio and the world's largest beverage distribution system, Coca-Cola is the world's largest non-alcoholic beverage company in this fairly competitive industry. From the case brief in 2010, it sees a 13% increase in net revenue, and the one major event driving this is the acquisition of a major bottler. So here we could expect that this event will affect analysts' forecast of Coca-Cola's market value in this year, which will be proven in the discussion later. So the usual steps of residual income valuation for a large cap firm like Coca-Cola is: Step 1 and 2 is obtaining financial statements from the firm's 10K. 10K is actually a more comprehensive and detailed report than the annual report. And then step 2, we make a condensed version of the financial statements to extract the key financial ratios and the income performances. Then step 3 is to determine the assumptions such as the cost of capital parameters and determine the forecast horizon for forecasting. In this case, the forecast horizon is set to be 2 years, which is 2011 and 2012, and the years after 2012 are considered to be the terminal value period. And after this last step, we use the residual income model to calculate the market value for Coca-Cola. So question 1 is pretty straightforward. It's to calculate the book value per share for year 2011. So taken from Exhibit 1 balance sheet, we just use the common shareholders' equity divided by the number of outstanding shares to get the book value of share at $13.53 per share. And this is question 1. And question 2 is to using residual income model to calculate the market value per share using the forecast from the exhibits. Here the numbers in black color are all given in the exhibits. So the exhibits are give two types of assumptions. The first is the forecast assumptions for cost of capital parameters. And from the orange box we can see that the cost of debt is given, and using the rest of the data we can forecast the cost of equity using Hamada equation. And also the exhibits give us the forecasted future performance ratios for the two-year horizon, which are 2011 and 2012, and the numbers are in black. So, using all given forecasts, now we'll move on to the residual income model. From the equation, you can see that there are 3 values that need to be determined. There are cost of equity, net income, and book value of equity to help us finally arrive at a market value of equity for Coca-Cola. So the first one, cost of equity, as shown previously in the orange box, as risk-free rate and market risk premium are all given, we just use the CAPM equation to forecast the cost of equity, which is 6%. And to forecast net income and book value equity, we will refer to the formulas. To forecast net income, we need to know NOPAT and the net interest expense after tax using the bolded formula as shown here, because the sales and NOPAT over sales ratios are given in the exhibits. And to forecast the net interest expense after tax, we use the net debt times cost of debt times 1 minus tax rate equation, because the net debt and cost of debt are given in the exhibits. And finally, the last value to be forecast is book value of equity, and we'll take the shareholders' equity from the condensed balance sheet. And now Louis will take over from here.
First, begin off by calculating the forecasted sales value over the years. So to find out the forecasted sales, the formula is actually to use the previous year's sales multiplied by 1 plus the forecasted sales growth, which is given to us in the case. And this will give us the current forecasted sales value. Next, we'll be using that forecasted sales value to determine these few values in the pro forma beginning balance sheet. So to better illustrate how to get these values, I'll be using the spreadsheet. So firstly, to start off with, for the beginning net working capital, The formula is actually using the beginning net working capital divided by sales forecast ratio multiply by sales, the forecasted sales, and this will give us the beginning net working capital. So it's a simple multiplication. And for beginning net long-term assets, it's actually the same method. So we'll be using forecasted sales and multiplied by this forecast ratio that involves beginning net operating long-term assets. And to determine beginning net operating assets is actually just a summation of the above two. So actually beginning net operating assets is equal to net capital, and this is proven at the side here. We have taken all these formulas from the textbook. So yes, it's proven that they are the same. And next on, we'll be moving on to determine net debt. So for net debt, it's actually also the same theory behind it. So for net debt, we'll be looking at net debt over book value of net capital forecast ratio multiply by the book value of net capital. So the book value of net capital is essentially this net capital over here, and that will give us net debt. Next, so actually preferred stock and shareholders equity also has the same logic behind it. It's actually just taking the net capital book value multiplied by their respective forecast ratios, and that will give us the forecasted preferred stock and forecasted shareholders equity for 2012 onwards. Yep, so this is all for pro forma beginning balance sheet forecast. So next, we'll be moving on to the pro forma income statement forecast. So right now we actually have to determine the net income, and to determine the net income we have to determine NOPAT first, as well as net interest expense after tax. So I'll be showing you using this spreadsheet also. So to determine NOPAT, this is also using the forecast performance ratio. So the formula is actually to use NOPAT over sales multiply by the sales, the forecasted sales figure for that year, and then this will give us the NOPAT, the forecasted NOPAT value. As for net interest expenses after tax, this is actually arrived here by multiplying net debt with the cost of debt that is given over here, as well as multiplying 1 minus the tax rate. So so this will give us the net interest expense after tax. And to arrive at net income is just sales plus NOPAT. NOPAT minus net interest expenses after tax, and this will give us net income. So preferred dividends actually essentially zero throughout the years, and that's why net income to common equity shareholders is actually just equals to net income. Yep, so that's all for pro forma income statement. And next, so lastly, we'll be moving on to residual income model, and this will help us to determine the residual income for respective years. So before we actually can arrive at residual income, we need to know, because residual income, the formula is actually net income minus equity charge, and equity charge is cost of equity multiplied by book value of equity for the year. So we have to find out what is the charge, what is the equity charge for that year. So equity charge in this Excel spreadsheet is calculated by using 6% cost of equity, which is explained by Pei Lin earlier on, multiplied by the book value of equity, which is found here at this row 26. Yes. So this by minusing away this equity charge from net income, we'll get residual income for that year. So actually next we have to find out the present value of residual income, because the market value of equity is actually essentially current book value of equity plus the PV, the sum of all the PVs of residual income. So that's why we have to find a PV of residual income. So the PV of residual income is actually just taking residual income divided by 1 plus the cost of equity and to the power of the number of years that has passed. So in 2011, actually it's just the residual income divided by 1 plus 6% because it's just 1 year from the beginning, because it's a 1 year, yeah. And for 2012 it's actually 2 years. And what's different for 2013, 2014 onwards is actually that these are beyond the forecast horizon. So essentially this present value of terminal abnormal earnings is actually the present value as at the beginning of 2013 beyond the forecast horizon. So which is why this value is actually calculated by taking 4177, the residual income, the terminal residual income, divided by the cost of equity minus the constant growth rate of 3%. And lastly, we have to find out the value of equity. So it's actually like I said just now, it's the beginning book value plus the sum of all the PV of residual income. So this beginning book value is actually taken from above, and these two PV values, this PV of residual income for forecasted year 1 and 2 is actually the sum of these two values. And this PV of residual income for terminal beyond the forecast horizon is actually calculated by taking this 139,249.61 divided by the 1 plus cost of equity to the power of 2, because you have to discount 2 years due to the 2 year horizon forecast. So this will lead us to the estimated value of equity. And lastly, to find out the estimated value per share, the formula is estimated value of equity divided by total number of shares outstanding. So total number of shares outstanding in 2010, at the end of 2010, is actually 2,292, which is why this estimated value per share is actually 165531.65 divided by 2,292, and this will give us $72.22 per share. So that's all for question 2.
For question 3, we'll be answering to what are the key assumptions that we are making in this process. So for the first assumption will be regarding the financial statements, whether we use that of a summary one or detailed one. So for condensed financial statements, basically it is a summary of financial statements in which it actually provides just enough information to do any analysis or decision making. And because there are lesser items in the financial statements, there is smaller set of assumptions required, so it's actually less tedious to come up with the financial statements. But the only flaw that it has is that it is less accurate. So for the detailed line item forecast, is basically just the opposite of that of the condensed financial statements forecast. But in this case, you'll be using that of a summary forecasting to make assumptions, because it is it provides just enough information for the forecast, and at the same time it is easier. Then for the next assumption is regarding the horizon financing. So forecast horizon is the period in which reasonably good estimate of future performance can be made, and then it's dependent on two things: the availability of information about Coca-Cola's future activities and prospects, as well as when competitive equilibrium will take place. In which the second point will consider 3 factors. One is the industry competitive environment. For example, in this beverage industry, there are few major rivals such as PepsiCo or Nestle. We also consider the firm's specific strategies. For example, like Coca-Cola has already produced products that are leaning towards the increasingly health-conscious trend. And lastly, we'll consider the persistent growth rate, in which we'll look at the industry or any other economical factors. So in this case, it is not a volatile industry, so a 2-year forecast horizon is sufficient, in which it means that we assume that Coca-Cola will reach a steady state of performance by the end of the 2-year period. Then for implicit financing, so you can see from the graph, there is a low historical variance in leverage, and there is no concrete information regarding management's plans to change the firm's capital structure. And given that this net financial leverage ratio tends to stabilize over time, it was already assumed that this capital structure will remain the same of 27.75% of debt to 72.25% of shareholders' equity. Then for the cost capital parameters, it was already earlier shown by my teammate on how did we get the cost of capital of 6%. So if we assume this constant cost of capital of 6% to discount the residual income, we will assume that the market interest rate will not change as well. Now I'll pass on to Faith to continue on.
So another key assumption would be sales growth. So it's currently declining, as you can see from the graph, and this is due to lower demand caused by increasingly health-conscious consumers who prefer beverages that are not so sweet. And in addition, the current non-alcoholic beverage market that Coca-Cola is in is currently very saturated. So it's highly unlikely that there will be further increases in demand for Coca-Cola's products. And furthermore, there's also very intense competition with PepsiCo, and this will undercut the demand and the increase in sales, and therefore we believe that the growth rate is unsustainable, and it is highly unlikely that the sales growth would mean revert to 3% due to forces of competitive equilibrium. Another key assumption we'll be looking at is no PET, and it is forecasted as a percentage of sales. And with any increases in key expenses, as you can see from the graph, from 2009 to 2010, and this would cause the margin of NOPAT to fall from 20% to about 15%, which is once again the mean reversion. And this is because net income will be affected, which would then affect NOPAT, and therefore the entire margin would fall. And some of the key expenses include like sweeteners and metals. And in the case it's stated that it's getting more costly to purchase such raw materials. And another assumption would be operating working capital ratio. So usually the working capital turnover ratio is quite stable over time, but it might change if the management decides to focus on better investment management, and therefore our projection would be based on the company's plan, and in this case it will be to maintain the operating working capital ratio at 3% of sales. Next will be operating long-term asset turnover ratio, and this ratio is once again stable over time generally, but it can change if management chooses to focus on production capacity, etc. And the operating long-term asset ratio decreased from 105% to 100% in this case, and it is due to a mean reversion due to very high competitive market. And therefore this is the end of all the key assumptions for question 3.
So now I'll be going through question 4. So it wants us to use the discounted cash flow model to derive a per share valuation estimate of Coca-Cola based on the same set of assumptions we used in question 2. And then we'll compare the two models. So this is the discounted cash flow model. So from this formula we can actually see the different variables that we actually need in order to get an estimate of the market value of equity. So this includes the free cash flow to equity holders, the return on equity or cost of equity, which is given by RE, and also the constant growth rate given by GE. And at the bottom is the formula for the calculation for free cash flow to equity holders, which is given by net income plus depreciation and deferred tax minus capital expenditure, and then minus or plus the increase or decrease in working capital, and plus or minus the increase or decrease in debt. So this is our calculations for the DCF model. So for the cost of common equity and the constant growth rate, we actually calculated it in question 2, which is 6% and 3% respectively. And next is the calculation for the free cash flow to equity. So first we'll be using the net income for each year minus the capital expenditure, and then minus or plus the increase or decrease in working capital, and then we'll plus or minus the increase or decrease in debt, which gives us the FCF to equity. And then we have to calculate the present value of the FCS for each year, and also the terminal FCF. So the terminal FCF we actually calculated using the constant growth rate of 3%. So through this DCF model, we actually got the estimated value of equity of $165,531.65 million, and divided by the number of shares outstanding, which is 2,292 million shares. So this actually gives us the estimated value per share of $72.22. So comparing the two models, the residual income model and the discounted cash flow model, firstly for value per share, both models actually give us the same value per share due to the fact that we use the same set of assumptions and inputs. So for the terminal value, for the residual income model, the terminal value is only made up of abnormal earnings, whereas for the discounted cash flow model, the terminal value is actually made up of both the abnormal and normal earnings. And thus the DCF model terminal value is actually higher than that of the terminal value of the RI model. So although the terminal value differs, the final figure of value per share is the same for both models due to the book value of equity, which was separately recorded under the residual income model. So for the basis of forecasting, for the residual income model, it focuses more on the accounting numbers such as reported earnings, net income, and book value of equity. Whereas for the discounted cash flow model, it only focuses on using free cash flows. So from this, our conclusion is that the residual income model actually uses more relevant information on the balance sheet when forecasting as compared to the discounted cash flow model. And for the inputs used in valuation, for the RI model, we actually have to use the forecasted book value of equity, net income, cost of equity, and growth rate. For the discounted cash flow model, we have to use the forecasted capital expenditure, net income, cost of equity, and growth rate. So from this, we actually can conclude that the DCF model requires more estimation, which actually may affect the accuracy of the valuation.